This video is sponsored by Vector Dash. Vector Dash lets you play popular PC games like Apex Legends and Fortnite on your Mac by streaming them online with near zero latency. They support Magic Arena, so now you can play Magic on your Mac. Try Vector Dash for free for 7 days and get $5 off your first month with the coupon code GOLDFISH at vectordash.com/goldfish. Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it is time for a super special video. As you know, every time a new set comes out, we like to break things down featuring the best cards in various formats, and today is Standard Day. So we're going to talk about the 10 sweetest or best standard cards from War of the Spark, and for this, I am joined by Mythic Championship competitor. Maybe by the time you're seeing this, Mythic Championship top 8 competitor. Winner. Yes. Hopefully. We're recording this like the day before the Mythic Championship starts. So by the time you hear this, we will know how Crim did. But how's it going, Crim? I'm rooting for you this weekend.
It's going well. I'm going to try to win. I'm a little jet lagged, but
yeah, I imagine that is a long trip. I was jet lagged going from New York to Las Vegas, and California to London is a little bit farther than that even. So that is that like fully across the world for you? Is that like the exact opposite side of the world almost?
If it isn't, it emotionally was, because I get anxiety flying. So like it was a 13-hour flight, and I was like, oh my gosh. And, I mean, luckily they had like some decent movies, but I ended up just playing like Mortal Kombat 11 all the way to London.
Well, anyway, good luck at the Pro Tour, but today our focus is on Standard and the 10 best War of the Spark cards for Standard. So, let's jump into it with number 10 on our list. And I should say, this list mostly on Crim. He sent me over his list. I looked it over. I was like, yeah, that looks actually pretty good to me. So, these are mostly Crim's selections, but
wow,
I also
dude,
think they're really good selections.
Throwing me to the wolves. These cards don't pan out. It's all Crim.
I'm giving you the credit for when these cards do pan out, and you look like a Standard genius.
Okay. So that's how I'll look at it.
And they're not all Esper cards, I promise. There are some non-Esper cards on our list as well.
You know.
But we kick things off with number 10 on our list with a card that's technically Esper, but it's not a card that I think you'll be playing in Esper control. God Eternal Bantu, our new Mythic God Sacrifice outlet. So, Crim, what do you think about God Eternal Bantu?
Well, okay, so the reason why this is on here is because it's we had kind of talked about it a little bit on our podcast, right? How all the gods, they come into play, they actually kind of don't do anything right away. I mean, they kind of do, but like, and on top of that, like they kind of, if they get removed, it's like you're like skipping a draw step somewhere down the line to draw like a 5-drop, right? But the thing here is God Eternal Bantu, when it hits the board, immediately you can sacrifice any number of permanents. This includes lands. So this just on its own is a sweet 5/6 menace threat. And then on top of that, you can sack your excess of lands, all this stuff, all these like late game. If I have like a bajillion little like Llanowar elves or something, or maybe this is in an aristocrats style of deck, I can sack these things and then just draw cards and then maybe get some like additional abilities off of that.
Yeah, I was playing the preview event this week, and I saw someone, they had like maybe like 7 or 8 lands on the battlefield and a few creatures, and they played God Eternal Bantu and sacked literally their entire board and down to like 3 lands. It just drew 10 cards. And I was like, whoa, that is pretty busted. I think for me, you can use it in other ways, but this for me screams aristocrat style deck. We have Cruel Celebrant now. I've seen people trying out the Devil that pings something whenever a permanent is sacrificed. I can't think of its name right now, but with that style of deck, you don't need that many creatures on the battlefield for God Eternal Bantu to not just be a ton of damage as you sacrifice your board, but a ton of card advantage, which potentially lets you set up to do it again the next turn. So, I think I'm really high on God Eternal Bantu. I think this card, the ability is a little weird and unique, but I think it can be very powerful in the right build.
I definitely think it's the most powerful and most like playable god so far of like the 5. I think the other ones are still very good, but I think this is the one that can be adapted in like strategies that are currently already existing and like maybe into newer strategies. It's a good advantage engine and it leaves a threat.
Well, let's move on to number 9 on our list. And we have another black card, Finale of Eternity. And this is kind of like a super removal spell that can kill a bunch of stuff. And if you got 1,000,000 mana, it obviously reanimates all your stuff, which is pretty insane. What are you doing with this one, Crim? Is this something that's in consideration for your Esper control deck in our new standard format?
Definitely not. I mean, not for my Esper control deck, but maybe something like Grixis midrange, Sultai midrange, these, tap out decks, right? And then you can also get back those creatures, cause I like it something paired with the new Nissa, because the new Nissa makes so your forests add an additional green. So it's very easy for you to just get like silly amounts of mana early. And then you're able to
I think I was messing around with the new Nissa with Vivian's Ark Bow, which might be a card that we talk about later. And
maybe
it's really amazing how much mana you can make with the new Nissa. You just like ramp into it and play it on turn 4, turn 5, and then you untap and you have like 12 mana, which makes it kind of the perfect card for all the finales. And this one is especially powerful. And if you're playing like a mostly green Golgari style deck, you have like all the explorer creatures, you have other ways to stock your graveyard, so you're probably going to have a lot of value if you can cast this for 10 or more mana. How good do you think it is as a removal spell? Like, is it good enough if you're casting it for like 6 mana to kill 3 things, 7 mana, or does the toughness part of it, how restrictive is that clause?
I mean, right now we're seeing a lot of bigger backsides on the creatures. So we'll see how good it is. I mean, I haven't gotten enough time to play test this card, but I think that it is a little daunting to like try to remove like a god with one of these cards. So I see it being amazing in like, you know, against like red deck and like these little like dinky creatures, or maybe like in the Sultai matchup where they're explorers whiff and they only draw like a bunch of lands off of them, right? So I think it's possible, but like the way the format's shaping up to be, there's a lot of beefy creatures.
And I've definitely seen the Sultai deck in specific cast like Hydroid Crosses with 10 or more power, which is the same amount that you need to like trigger the X 10 or more clause on this. So it doesn't seem that impossible that you can play this as like a 1 of or a 2 of in your Sultai deck and actually eventually just hit your land drops with Explore and have this close out the game in the late game.
Yeah. Finales, I think it seems a little outlandish, like, oh, the 10 or more part, but this format seems like it's going to be pushing a little bit more of a mid-range and a little bit of a slower format to me. So I wouldn't be surprised if we actually see the 10 or more clause come into effect.
Well, speaking of finales, let's move on to number 8 on our list and finale number 2 on our list, Finale of Devastation. And this is probably the finale that I think has been getting the most hype across formats because it looks a little bit similar to a Green Sun Zenith, which is so good it's like banned in Modern. But what are we doing with Finale of Devastation in Standard, Grim?
I mean, this is just a way to like actually just tutor up a creature, right? And if you ever get to do like a silly amount, like let's just say for the sake of the art, Carnage Tyrant, or because like a 10 or like I think that the 10 or more is actually going to happen more often than you would think too, because with Nissa, it's in the same colors as Nissa too, and yeah, like. If it's 10 or more, creatures you control get +X and gain haste until end of turn. So it's not just like that one creature that you tutor up is going to get the pump. It's your whole board. So I think being able to also just go through your deck, grab a key creature that's needed in the moment, is also a huge plus.
Yeah, and I think we were talking about like Bantu in some of these other powerful effects. A lot of those are cards that seem really good, but they're not necessarily cards you want 4 of with someone like the Gods, for example. And being able to play a couple of copies, maybe even just 1 copy, and have something like Finale of Devastation to find it consistently when it's good, but not run into those draws where you have like triple Bantu in hand. You're like, oh goodness, this is not ideal. I think that's part of the power of a card like Finale of Devastation is it does allow you to cheat on the numbers a little bit, or play a spicy 1 of that you don't necessarily want to draw every matchup, but still find it when it's good. And that might even be more relevant for like best of 1 standard on Arena, where you're really incentivized to try to have these answers in your main deck. A card like Finale lets you find those answers even if you're not playing the full 4 copies.
Correct. Like being able to like just search up a Brontodon, like, or something like that to just like destroy a problematic artifact or enchantment is just great. So
yeah, I think this one's really good. I'm excited for this one, and you'll probably hear more about it because I expect this might show up on our Modern list as well. So anyway, let's move on to number 7 on our list, which is another green card. And this one is one that I think has been growing on both of us. Vivian's Ark Bow. When I first saw this, I was like, okay, yeah, this is fine, but it's kind of expensive and it's legendary. Yeah. But the more I've seen this card in play, the more it seems like it's actually pretty busted. So, Crim, what are we doing with Vivian's Ark Bow?
What can't we do with it? So let's ask that question, because it's, at first I thought it was kind of bad because I was like, oh, well, you can only activate this at like sorcery speed, so that's kind of lame. And then I read the card again. And it's like, wait, it does not say that anywhere. So yeah, like this is going to make attacking for your opponents like a living nightmare. I mean, if you have open mana, like, well, you can try to hope that your opponent whiffs, but you know what I mean? Like that's not likely. I just being able to grab whatever whenever you need it is huge. I think it's very good because of that. Like just example, like at every part of the curve, you can kind of dig for something. I think that's very good on its own. Just like discard a card, like late game when you have all these excess lands, this allows me to do more with it.
Yeah, with this card, I really love that it's basically impossible to flood out. Like in the late game, when you have all your mana, like you don't really care if you draw a land. When if you don't have Vivian's Ark Bow, drawing that land off the top when you're empty-handed is just like so soul-crushing, and you're like, oh no. But Vivian's Ark Bow, it solves that problem completely, and I'll be really curious to see if a deck can develop that really takes advantage of the instant speed aspect of Vivian's Ark Bow, because the instant speedness, that makes it perfect for some sort of like weird control-y deck if you're getting like Frilled Mystics, and if you have a like control deck where you're not wanting to tap out, but still being able to tutor up like flash creatures maybe, other things that you can do at instant speed, it seems like Vivian's Ark Bow would be insane in a strategy like that.
It also really helps us play around all the new sweepers and stuff like that. So like if you're playing like against some kind of control opponent, either Time Wipe or whatever, and Kaya's Wrath, well, okay, normally you'd be afraid to commit to the board, so you only play these few threats, and then you connect. You just kind of hit them down with these Jade Lights and like a Wild Growth or something for some time, but you don't want to commit more to the board, and you have to take your whole next turn after the board wipe to rebuild. But now they wipe, and at the end of their turn, you can go dig for a creature and start putting things on the board again.
Yeah, I think the only limiting factor of this card is you do need a reasonable number of creatures. I think you got to make sure you have enough creatures where you're hitting consistently, and preferably like hitting maybe multiple options is even more powerful when you actually have like some card selection in your Vivian Ark Bow. Mm-hmm. So if you decide to build around it, make sure you're playing that critical mass of creatures. But as long as you have enough creatures, this card, it seems when I first saw it, I was like, okay, this is probably a good sideboard card against control decks. Like you sneak it in early, and it makes it really hard for their counter spells to do anything or their sweepers to do much. But I think this has moved up in my estimation from sideboard card against control to just like main deck option now that I've seen it played.
I mean, like I know that I'm like finishing up an article right now, but like the thing is, at the point of when I'm writing this article, it was mostly in the sideboard, but I'm starting to also move it more into the main board. It just feels like it's so cheap too. Like it's a 2-mana card. What the only issue is that it doesn't kind of really do anything when it hits the board. So, but we'll see. Like if the format is as slow as it's supposed to, like as it looks, I think this card will be huge.
Let's move on to number 6 on our list. We stay in the world of green cards, and even in the world of Vivian's, I guess. Vivian, Champion of the Wilds, a new 3-mana Planeswalker. Crim, why don't you tell us a little bit about Vivian Planeswalker?
It's weird. I've never picked so many green cards in my life. I kind of just forgot this color existed.
Next thing you know, we're going to have Carnage Tyrant on the top 10 list, and I'm not going to know what to do.
Like this Vivian, I think hasn't had enough praise. I think it's being overlooked right now, but okay, it's a 3-mana Planeswalker. It gives, like the Yeva effect on all your creatures. You have flash, right? And that is huge because it pairs very well with the minus effect. Because, one of the things that I personally had to read over again was like Vivian does not care if like the card that's exiled, even if Vivian's gone, as long as that card is exiled, you can still play it. And that means that pairs very well with the flash. So you find something sweet off the top, end of your opponent's turn. Once again, just drop a creature in, right? And then it starts at 4 loyalty for a 3-mana Planeswalker and can go up to 5. So this already is kind of like it for a 3-mana Planeswalker, and what it's doing, it kind of protects itself by having a high loyalty count. And on top of that, you're able to plus. So let's say if I'm going like, I don't know, I have a branch walker or something like that. I can attack with the branch walker and still have it up to block and protect Vivian some more. Like if you're like untapping with this Vivian, it feels very good.
Yeah, I think I'm especially high on all the 3-mana green planeswalkers just because we're in a Llanowar Elf format, and if you could play a planeswalker on turn 2, especially one like Vivian that comes in with 5 loyalty, that's just such a huge swing. It's even with no protection, it is very unlikely your opponent's going to be able to immediately kill your turn 2 planeswalker, and then you get to untap, you start drawing cards, assuming you hit creatures, which if you're building a Vivian deck, you should be built in a way where you're hitting creatures with your Vivian -2, flashing them in, defending Vivian, and it seems like the value can just snowball from there and kind of run away with the game. So, yeah, I think Vivian is a card that people are maybe sleeping on a little bit at the moment, and it does just a lot of really good things in a creature deck.
Yeah, it's everything I would like. I'm not gonna lie to you. Like, I almost wanted to renounce my love for non-creature decks.
Crim's gonna switch over and become a mono green stompy player now.
I've always been a stompy player. What are you talking about?
Let's move on to number 5 on our list, and we're getting back into the world of Crim cards. This seems like something that might show up in an Esper control deck. Commence the endgame, and I think the best comparison I've heard from this card is it's a Torrential Gearhulk that always flashes back some sort of divination effect, a draw 2 effect. What do you think of that comparison, Crim? Is that basically where this fits in Standard?
I see where this card is better than a Torrential Gearhulk because it'll be bigger than a 5/6, right? I mean, like late game, this is always going to resolve against your opponents, right? And being able to like potentially have like a 7/7 is huge. The amass part of this gives a body. I love it. The draw 2, sure, I don't get to scry, but the fact that I get a body out of it is more than enough. And the fact that the spell can't be countered. I love this card. It doesn't seem like much. It's not crazy flashy, but it's just, I think, like something that I'm definitely going to be playing like maybe 2 to 3 of in my control decks.
Yeah, it seems like an insane finisher for a control deck. A control deck probably not going to have too many other amass cards, so you're likely going to be getting a creature when you cast your Commence the Endgame. It's going to give you a massive flash blocker, essentially, where you can flash it in during combat on your opponent's turn, potentially eat an attacker. It could in the control mirror since it can't be countered. Just all around, this card seems very, very powerful. Also interesting for decks like the Wilderness Reclamation style decks, maybe a Simic Reclamation or Teamer Reclamation, where you get card draw plus another line of attack for closing out the game with a big body, or at worst case, a big blocker. So if you're making a bunch of mana and trying to kind of win in the late game with spells, this seems like a really easy inclusion for any style of deck like that.
Yeah, or like imagine like playing this in like a blue-red spells deck and like copying this.
Ooh, yeah, that's going to make a big zombie, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Let's move on to number 4 on our list, and we have a card that I figured would be on our list. Teferi Time Raveler. This is the crimiest of Crim cards. So, Crim, you love Teferi more than basically anything.
It's an understatement.
How does our new little Teferi compare to big Teferi that we currently have in Standard?
I'll tell you how it compares. It doesn't, because they don't do the exact same thing, but the fact is they will go in the same deck together. This is like a super reflector mage, right? Like you get to drop it and you get to return up to 1 target artifact, creature, or enchantment to its owner's hand, then draw a card. The fact that this is 3 mana, this comes down early. This is like, you know, kind of a little bit like Vivian and whatnot, like the other, like all these decks now, they have these 3 mana planeswalkers, meaning like there's actually crazy threats that punish you if you tap out early. Or if you do something early and you're at the control point of the game, or you just have these crazy bomby cards that kind of like snowball out of control early. Teferi sticking around means that, you know, like you get to instant speed Kaya's Wrath. And I read the passive. This is the most important thing. The passive on Teferi, I thought it was like it shut them off only on your turn, but no, this just makes it so much like the creature Teferi, the Archmage of Zhalfir or whatever from years ago. Each opponent can cast spells only anytime they can cast a sorcery. That's so much better than what I thought it was. So immediately after that, when I decided to actually read my cards for once, like, wow, this is even better than I thought it was. And the minus, as I said already, just bounces anything. It's like a super reflector mage and draws you a card. So I love it. For the cost of 3 mana, this is exactly where I want to be.
Yeah, Teferi has been for me, one of the cards I've been most impressed with now that I've started to play with the set a little bit. When you see it, you're like, all right, it's 3 mana. You can draw a card. Yeah, flashing stuff in, that's cute, but it's actually so much better than that. Being able to cast your sorceries at instant speed is huge. It essentially makes all of your spells uncounterable, since your opponent can only cast spells when they could cast a sorcery. And then the card draw ability is pretty solid as well. You can do some really cool things with various like finales, which are even better if you can cast them at instant speed. Wrath, as you talked about, other removal spells. This is a card. What do you think about this against control?
Amazing.
Yeah, this seems like a card that is good in control decks, and also a card that you could see like blue-white aggro play against control and have it be really good as well, because it's shutting down all that instant speed interaction and counter spells. So I expect that we'll see a lot of Teferis in War of the Spark Standard, really across the spectrum. Like, it's pretty rare that you have a Planeswalker that is good in control decks, good potentially in aggro decks and mid-range decks, and I think that's basically what Teferi Time Raffler is.
Yeah. And you know, like, it'll deal with like the annoying Nexus of Fates at the end of turn. Like, you gotta do it. You gotta do it now. Like, this comes down early. And much like Vivian, 4 loyalty goes up to 5. Love it.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to another 3-mana Planeswalker. This is our 3-mana Planeswalker list. Gideon Blackblade. This is one that I don't think is going to show up in your Esper control deck, even though it's white. To me, this is maybe the most aggressive Planeswalker in the set. I think you just play Gideon and just smash face with it repeatedly. But what do you think about this one, Crim?
Mono white. Mono white's going to have, the fact that it's already a creature is wonderful, right? Like, cause like normally before you had to like 0 or something, right? To make it so that Gideon can become a creature and attack. This is always going to be a creature on your turn. So you don't have to use your activation. You get to plus. So you can potentially like swing the game in your favor if it's like a mono white mirror match or something like that. Cause your creature gets up to one other target creature you control gains your choice of vigilance, lifelink, or indestructible until end of turn. Love it. And it also exiles a non-land permanent. So it's also removal later on in the game. So you're actually ticking up because you don't have to waste an activation to make it a creature. So it's always going to be a creature. And then you're ticking up, and eventually you're going to be able to exile even a Planeswalker or a problematic thing like, I don't know, mono white. If I have what's the thing? The black-white 6-mana enchantment, Ethereal Absolution.
Yeah.
Like you can deal with that now, right? So there's just a lot you can do with Gideon for this is great for an aggro deck.
Yeah, it's a great threat on its own. The +1 can be used as like protection. You just make some random 1-drop indestructible and you can block basically anything that would want to go at Gideon. And the -6 I think is huge. Like, it gives the mono white deck something that it kind of lacks in the main deck. Actually, one of the reasons it splashes into blue a lot of the times is for Deputy of Detention, just to have that catch-all answer spell. Being able to snipe, like you said, a Planeswalker, a Wilderness Reclamation, a Search for Iskanto, whatever permanent is troubling you, or worst case, you just get your opponent's best blocker out of the way so you can get an even more damage, and it gets there really quickly. It only takes 2 turns of plussing, and while it feels bad to cash in your Gideon, still, you got a couple of attacks out of your Gideon, or a couple of pluses and an attack out of your Gideon, and you got a 3-mana, like, Vindicate style spell, which is still, that's a fine deal for 3 mana. Like, even if you just plus, get in 1 attack, minus, your Gideon has done a lot of work for 3 mana.
Yeah, like, imagine, like, just giving the lifelink to, like, an Adonto Vanguard. Like, sure, okay, I'll pay the 4 life, give it indestructible, right? So, like, there's a lot you're doing with this, and Gideon's ult, as we'll call it, because it's technically an ult, very flavorful. Willing to give himself up. Love you, Gideon. R.I.P.
Well, let's continue talking Planeswalkers. Moving on to one of the biggest baddies from the set, Nicol Bolas, the Dragon God, or just Dragon God, I guess. No "the" in there. Our new Grixis Planeswalker, and this has got to be one of the spiciest Planeswalkers from the set, but it's also probably one of the best Planeswalkers from the set. Like, you can't play it janky and try to, like, make infinite copies of it with bad Jace Cunning Castaway or whatever, but you could just slam this in Grixis control, and it kind of feels like Grixis Teferi almost, or something. Is that a fair comparison to compare Nicol Bolas to your fabled Teferis, Crim?
Yes, because the thing here is, first off, it can copy any ability on the board, which is sweet. And then it blows it like it, the +1, you draw a card, each opponent exiles a card from their hand or permanent they control. Well, in the archetype of Grixis, it's not going to be hard for you to grind your opponent out of cards where they have nothing on board, right? And usually then at that point, they're like, okay, well, I'll easily exile a card from my hand because I have nothing. But at that point, now you're starting to eat away at their lands, you're eating away at their resources, things on board, and it's that +1 is absurd. That +1 is so good. And then of course you go down the minus, kill a creature or planeswalker, sure. And obviously the ult is a game winner. But this card is now why you would go into Grixis. This is the big payoff, right? You have your 5 mana payoff here in Grixis.
Yeah, it's also right on curve with the M19 version of Nicol Bolas, which is another very powerful Grixis card, and then you can play like Ugin or something if you want to on 6. But yeah, I think the +1 is a huge deal. It's very close to you draw a card and your opponent discards a card, which is just like a 2-for-1, but it's a 2-for-1 that happens every single, I mean, I guess it is literally a 2-for-1, but it happens every single turn, which means that value becomes insurmountable really, really quickly. Like, it's cute to be like, oh, I'm going to build around this stealing the loyalty abilities, but really, like, you just play it, you plus it. If you need to, you can snipe any of the 36 planeswalkers from War of the Spark, plus like the fairies and all the powerful holdover planeswalkers. How often do you think this will win the game, Crim? Is this actually like a legit win condition, that -8?
Yeah, I mean, well, first off, I definitely can see it being a win condition, because by the time we get to, 5 turns later, think about how many times you've plussed. Like, what do they have at this point, right? Like, you're eating away at their lands. It's starting to get hard for them to like play cards. Like, you know what I mean? Like, eventually they're just not going to have anything.
Yeah, no, that is very true. It does get to that point, and that's what it's kind of like a disinformation campaign that you get for free every turn.
Yeah.
A slight twist on that. In disinformation campaign, even at 3 mana every time you cast it, that is still a pretty good card at grinding people out of the game. Nicol Bolas just does that for free every single turn. You can leave up your mana for other stuff. Yeah, this card, it's absolutely insane. I think we'll be seeing a lot of Nicol Bolas Dragon Gods. Do you think this puts Grixis back in the conversation? There was a time when Grixis was pretty playable in Standard. It had kind of fallen off. Esper was really the kind of like slower deck of choice for control, Sultai for mid-range. Do you think that this card is going to lead to a resurgence of Grixis mid-range, Grixis control, whatever?
It definitely gives it the power, because like before, the reason why you were afraid to play a Grixis deck for control is because you didn't have an efficient way to deal with enchantments, and you still kind of don't, right? But the thing is, with Nicol Bolas's plus enough times, maybe you can get there. But there's Ugin now, so you can also play Ugin to pair with Nicol Bolas, which, by the way, is very good because you get the activated abilities of other planeswalkers. So you can go, +1 from Ugin and then +1 from Nicol Bolas copying Ugin, right? So that's like getting you 2/2/2s and stuff like that. So
and Ugin is also kind of enchantment removal.
Yep. So now maybe you have a way to play some like control. Yeah, it's 6 mana. It's very high up on the curve, and sometimes that means maybe your control opponent flipped his Kanta, but worry about that later. Because maybe at some point you'll actually be able to just exile the land itself. But yeah, like Nicol Bolas, very powerful, huge payoff, and I can definitely see it in a tap out strategy, a control strategy, either or.
Well, let's move on to the last card on our list, our number 1 card, another Planeswalker, probably not surprising. We've seen a lot of Planeswalkers today. Liliana, Dread Horde General, our new 6 mana Planeswalker. Crim, what do you think about Liliana?
Easily just like, I think the best Planeswalker in the set. It goes in all the archetypes, mid-range, control, whatever it is, right? Because the passive ability, whenever a creature you control dies, draw a card. It's +1, create a 2/2 zombie token. It's not a tap zombie token, so I love that. You -4 for a Barter in Blood. Sure, you get to do the Cataclysm effect out of the -9, but I'm not even reading the ultimate. I don't care at this point, right? Because at this point, I'm just plussing, and then whenever I need to chump block, right? Send stuff in front of them. Like, imagine resolving this against Sultai midrange and you're on control or something like that. Well, their game plan is to run you out of cards, but you're literally just going to always draw a card with this. Unless they remove it, right? Okay, sure.
I think that's the sneaky part that you kind of miss with this in a controller mid-range strategy is that +1, it's kind of like make a 2/2 and draw a card because you can just chump block with that zombie to protect your Liliana and then you draw another card, which seems insane. It reminds me a little bit of Big Vraska coming down at 6 mana, plussing to make a 2/2 blocker, having a removal negative ability. So I feel like Liliana, it's probably just like better Vraska actually in a lot of ways because you don't get that card advantage out of Vraska, and Vraska has been a playable planeswalker even at 6 mana in standard, so I imagine that an upgraded Vraska probably going to be pretty good.
Yeah. And once again, dealing with the dreaded Carnage Tyrant. Because the thing is, like, because, you know, like, they'll play, like, hexproof threats, and they'll play, like, a Llanowar Elf with it. So it plays around like an Eldritch Reborn. Well, now they have to play a third creature, which then leads them into, like, playing into a board wipe, if I don't have it.
So do you think, is this a card that is in the conversation for Esper control?
Yes, 100%. I would play this in Esper. I'm definitely playing this in Esper.
It seems pretty scary to play your Teferi into a Liliana Dreadhorde General. That is just an absurd amount of card advantage attached to Planeswalkers that just sit out there and eventually are going to ultimate and close out the game.
Unless I get Elder Spelled, which we don't know. And they swing it in their favor because they have their own Teferi and Liliana, and they just
ultimate it immediately with Elder Spell.
But yeah, like this is just where I want to be. Like, for this card is so good. It's going to be played in multiple decks.
Yeah, I'm excited to try out Liliana, and really, I feel like that brings us to the end of our top 10 list, and I feel like this set is so insane that we kind of just scratched the surface. Like, something like Ugin is another really powerful 6-mana planeswalker that didn't even show up on our list. We didn't talk about a bunch of other cards that I think are going to be standard playable, so I feel like War of the Spark, I don't know what you think, Crim, but I think this set is pretty insane. Like, how would you rate this set overall in terms of power level for standard?
It's absolutely bonkers. The power level on this set is just, like you had mentioned, there's so many cards still on here that we haven't touched, right? You didn't even, like, we talked about Nissa, but we didn't get to go like fully into detail. There's the other gods, right? Like, you have all the other gods. Like, there's so many good cards in this set. You have Massacre Girl. Like, so the overall power level of the set is just absolutely bonkers.
Yeah, I agree. The set is insane, and let us know what you think. I think that brings us to the end of our video today. So let us know, what are your 10 favorite cards, or what did we miss? What should be on this list, off this list? Give us your opinion in the comments, because it's an awesome set to talk about. Like we said, there's so many potential cards that I'm sure there's some stuff that you're going to really love that we didn't get to. So let us know what you think. Crim, thanks for hanging out. Good luck this weekend. I know this is probably going to be posted next week, but hopefully by this time, Crim will be Pro Tour champion, Crim. So good luck in the tournament this weekend.
Thanks, Seth.
And thanks to everyone for watching. So this has been our top 10 standard cards for War of the Spark. We will be back to cover Modern with Richard, Commander with Tomer, so keep an eye out for those as well. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, help us out by clicking that like button down below. And to keep up on all the latest and greatest, click that subscribe button. And don't forget to hit that bell icon to get alerts whenever we have new videos. And if you want to, check out some of our other sweet videos here and here.